All right, welcome everyone. As I mentioned, we are recording this meeting, so if you need to revisit anything or share it with someone else in your community, feel free. I have muted everyone that's come into the meeting, so if you need something, please feel free to use the chat function. We have folks that are monitoring that. And then we will do our best. We do have more than 150 folks that are registered for this, so if you want to turn your cameras off to preserve bandwidth for those who might have limited capacity, I am sure that they would appreciate it. So I'm Erin Welty with WEDC. I am thrilled that you are all here to see our fabulous launch of the Vibrant Spaces grant. The fact that you're here and that so many of you are here demonstrates that there really is a need and a desire to make our communities vibrant spaces, which is not surprising, but we are going to cover today the basics of the grants and kind of how it came to be and what we're looking for, and then we will hopefully take your questions as we go. So without further ado, so today's goals, I am going to do a brief intro on the placemaking kind of concept and process. I know many of you, this is second nature and you're aware of everything that I'm going to share, but it is nice to be able to just kind of put us all in the same frame of mind, same background. And then we'll cover the basics of the grants and what makes a great project and what we're looking for from applications, and then some of the fine print and Q&A related to actually making an application, how to apply, what happens if you get a grant, etc. So first and foremost, probably the Vibrant Spaces grant is about placemaking. Placemaking is a new fancy term, but it's, you know, the long-standing goal of placemaking is to make places that people want to be, which I'm sure all of you, by virtue of being here, are doing for your communities, trying to create your communities as places where people want to live, where workers want to hang out, where visitors want to spend time. We're promoting communities that create spaces that promote health, happiness, and well-being of Wisconsinites and encourage engagement and interaction of residents, locals, tourists alike. So a good placemaking project capitalizes on the local assets of a place and on the potential, and it's defined by those who live, work, and play there. So a good placemaking project involves public input and involves folks that have a say in making their spaces better. And all of these are examples of spaces that are around Wisconsin, really creative ways that folks have made their spaces interesting, engaging, and overall memorable. A good space is something that you remember. I always tell our communities, I do work primarily in downtown development for those who don't know me, and I always tell our communities that no one has ever taken wedding photos at a strip mall. So if you keep in mind that a great space is somewhere that, you know, is memorable and you want to capture on a photo, that's what we're going for. So why are we supporting placemaking? Because having vibrant spaces supports the local economy. We know for a fact that visitors who spend longer in a community or a district spend more. If you have the ability to sit down, rest, use the bathroom, get a drink, you're going to have the energy and the encouragement to stay longer, make more stops, you know, have an extra meal, things like that. We know that the walkable spaces within our communities, whether that's a true downtown or a commercial district in a rural area or a neighborhood commercial district in a city, that's where we have the most economic density, and investing in those places really has the biggest boost to our local economy. So residents that are walkable to businesses and to entertainment spend 200% more than those who have to drive there, and that shouldn't come as any surprise if you think about your own life. If you have to drive, if you work upstairs from a coffee shop, you're going to visit there twice as often as if you have to get in your car and drive across town to get a coffee at a Starbucks or something like that. So we know that that walkable areas and walkable gathering spaces are far more utilized and promote residents to engage, gather, and visit nearby businesses. And the average walkable household to local businesses spends about $9,000 a year in local goods and services. So if you want to make your commercial districts vibrant, having more folks that live there is important. And for folks to live there, they have to have somewhere to gather and to spend money, especially if you're not going to have, yards. Having these vibrant spaces is really a quality of life topic. And it's also a quality of life issue for the workers who are in those areas. So why are communities doing placemaking? It's a great way to engage residents in making the community theirs. One exercise that we often do when we have when we do placemaking workshops in our community is we put little X's of tape underneath the chair legs before folks come in. And when they come in and we start the lesson, the first thing that we do is point out that every single person in the room relocated their chair. Even if they just move it 1 inch, in either direction, people want to feel like they have control over their spaces. So by letting them be involved and having a way to contribute, really you're helping engage your residents, which is how you can retain them and make them come back if they're young folks that you're hoping to have return. So promoting a vibrant commercial district has a really big impact on property taxes, on local retail spending, healthier lifestyles. More activity also equals safer streets, which is something that many of our communities are looking for. So these type of placemaking projects help achieve all of that. So what's the difference between a place and a space? All of us have both of these in our communities, hopefully. A space is just a space. It can be anything. It can be it's a geographically defined area. So all of those pictures that you see here are spaces. However, they are not all places that are experienced. A place is a small and local sort of space. It has defined limits and it has a context. It has a memory. Again, no one has ever made a memory of a strip mall or a commercial corridor with pole signs. Those are spaces that we move through, but they're not places that we seek out and return to. So there's lots of things that we do in communities with the best of intentions that are not places. These kind of experiences happen when we don't take what people want into account and just build something that meets all of our landscaping design points, or that we think it looks pretty on a site plan, or it's nice and straight and easy to plow. But if it doesn't correspond with what people are looking for, they won't use it. And the same goes for vibrant gathering spaces as well. If it doesn't meet the needs of the people that we're trying to attract, they're not going to use it and it's going to sit empty. So here's another whole series of benches that no one would ever in their right mind sit in, all of which, were installed with the best of intentions, whether because there was a requirement of landscaping or just, people thought that it was something that you did is to add benches without any thought to how and where they were situated. So placemaking is both an art and a science. There are obviously lots of actual tactical knowledge about, what makes a good space in terms of, how to design a space that has the appropriate lighting and shade and wind blockage and seating configurations. But it's also important to think about how people feel in the space. Is it adaptable and flexible to different uses? And does it encourage all of our community to join to spend time there, or just a handful of places? Is it somewhere that has a shared ownership that everyone feels that they are welcome? It is not uncommon when we do placemaking projects, especially in Wisconsin, where people are hesitant to step out of line, where we'll actually put on the chairs, "Welcome, please sit on me," because people need an invitation sometimes to know that they are supposed to be in a space and spend time there. So you might think about the Maslow's kind of hierarchy of needs. Do I have a place to sit and stand? Do I have shelter? Do I have food and water options nearby? Do I have an experience that I can take advantage of? But all of these things are ways to consider, what might make a good place. It has both a functional capacity in terms of, is it able to be built in the space? Is it well designed? Is it, able to be maintained within our current budget? And is it also a place that a user can adapt to their own needs? Can different groups use it at the same time? And then there's piece over here you see of data collection and evaluation. We are also going to incorporate that in our Vibrant Spaces grant and expect folks to actually capture data on how these spaces are being used and what benefits it had on the community. So again, to summarize, the rules of placemaking are to meet the user's needs, to involve the users in creating and changing the space. So you'll see when we talk about criteria, we are looking for communities that have involved partners in planning those spaces. Spaces that give users some sort of control over the environment, whether that's movable seating or the opportunity to be in the shade or in the sun. To have a process. Yeah.
I lost your webinar slides.
Oh,
and
no.
I don't know if anybody else has. Yep, so Andy, our guest, just mentioned it too.
All right.
So I'm going to let you refresh. There you go.
Where did
You're
you?
Back.
Did you
Maybe
lose
the prior slide.
That one?
Yeah, that's the last one I think we saw as a group.
Okay, good. Well, that was the last one, so you didn't miss much then. Okay, thank you, Tina. So again, good placemaking involves both an art and a science, and considering the user experience as well as the physical aspects of a space. So the rules of assessing kind of whether what you're doing is placemaking. Does it meet the user's needs? Does it involve the users in planning for the design and the use of the space? Does it give users some control over their environment so that they can do whatever that is that they might want to do in a space? Is there a process for testing and, before you spend tens of thousands of dollars on a space, there's lots of ways to test those concepts to make sure that what you're going to install is going to be what people are want, and to get public input in advance. And then to identify specifically what audiences or experiences do we want to attract to the space. So making sure that, young people might want to spend time there, as well as working folks during the day, older shoppers who need a place to rest, folks who are attending events. Are all those people going to feel welcome and able to enjoy the space? And then, of course, because we all have limited budgets, making sure that those physical improvements that we're making to the space and the activities, uses, and events that folks are desiring, all of those both require stewardship management capacity. So something that's not going to be funded under the grant is programming and capital maintenance and improvements to the space after it's built. But obviously that's something that you're going to want to consider as you're planning your spaces. How can we design something that fits our budget right now, that meets the needs of our users and accommodates a lot of events that can be programmed by our partners, but also something that's going to hold up and be able to be maintained over time. So I just had some examples. One thing that, as I've been talking to many of you who are very excited about this, and you're like, what about this space? And we have this space. I know that lots of folks, really have a sense of what placemaking is. And they're like, okay, well, we just redid our downtown plaza, and our other downtown park, that we're thinking of isn't going to be ready to build next year. So then their mind immediately goes to, okay, what's next on our parks plan or our outdoor recreation plan? But I would encourage you not to forget that this grant is not just for parks. It is for vacant and underutilized spaces. So if you have, like in the picture, a parking lot that maybe isn't really needed for cars because people just aren't visiting as much as they used to, or because land uses have changed, consider that as an opportunity. And it can still be a space where you're parking cars during the weekday, but maybe that the grant provides for some accommodations on the weekend. Or maybe it's an infill site in your downtown or your commercial district where a building burned down, and right now it's gravel or at best grass. Could it be a sculpture park? Can it be an outdoor living space? Can it be a communal dining area? What sort of spaces can we create out of leftover places that maybe are currently not serving any purpose, but can be used to revitalize our communities and create vibrant spaces? Alleys are another one, or back lots. So while parks are great, it does not have to be an established park space to make it eligible for this grant. Also think about 4 seasons. I mean, There are spaces, obviously, that can be used all 4 seasons, and so some of the eligible uses include seasonal amenities that can be used year over year to encourage people to spend time outdoors year round. So ultimately, the grant is about providing economic opportunity and creating vibrant spaces where people want to go. This is one of my favorite slides. Those of you who have seen me present before know that I like to show that this is from the Better Block Project, which does great TED Talks if you want to Google them. But their whole premise is that if you create places where people want to be by adding furnishings and landscaping and painted crosswalks and easier parking and bike racks and something to do, giant games, people will come out. That you can show that there is an economic opportunity in a district by creating a place where people want to hang out. And by hanging out and walking by businesses, they're also going to spend time and money and have a passion for the commercial districts that they are near, which then obviously makes those small businesses more successful. So as I said, one of the things that we are going to ask of grant applicants and recipients is to measure the results. Obviously, the results will depend on what your goals are, but we want people to identify how are the spaces not being used now? What are the issues that keep them from being used? Who is missing? What uses could be accommodated there that maybe are not, and how are we going to change that? And then after the project, what happened? How many people showed up? How many more events were held in the space? How long did people stay? How much spending did they do at nearby businesses? Just to be able to demonstrate that what the impact of having these spaces in your districts are. So, and again, if there's opportunities to do iteration and adaptation to find projects that maximize that, all the better. I realize that might not always be the case for all communities. So what you were all here for, the basics of the new Vibrant Spaces grant. So these are grants to municipalities or counties. So government entities have to be the applicants, but we want there to be community partnerships. So if you are listening on this call because you are part of a merchant association, a chamber, a downtown organization, an arts group, please partner with your local municipality to put together a grant for a space within your district. They are going to be one-to-one matches of $25,000 to $50,000. So those are for hard costs associated with building the space. Again, not for maintaining or programming it. It's a pilot project within our CDI, Community Development Investment Grant Program. So one grant is allowed per municipality. So you can't, even if your county is your best friend, you can't get 2 applications within your municipality by having the county apply for one and you apply for another. So everybody only gets one. It does not impact your ability to get a traditional CDI grant. So if you had already been looking at doing that, you can continue with that, but you can also get one of these if that's something you're looking for. So it is a pilot project and we're looking to demonstrate demand and need. So we have only enough funds allocated to fund up to about 30 awards. And we'll talk in a minute about what makes a good project and how applications will be evaluated. The application deadline will be January 31st. We did provide some time for the team to go back out if people didn't provide enough information or if we have questions that aren't clear, to get that clarified so that everyone will have an equal shake when it comes to the evaluation. We'll have apples to apples comparisons of what it is that everyone is hoping to achieve with their projects. As a result, award announcements will be made next May for those that are going to be recipients of the first round. So what makes a good project? So a good project, from the perspective of this grant, transforms a single space by adding multiple elements to it and accommodating multiple uses. So you'll see that there are eligible uses like wayfinding signage, but the grant is not going to fund a wayfinding program for your whole community. Similarly, eligible uses might include restrooms, but a good project is not only going to stick a restroom building in an existing park. That's not transformational of the space. It is important, and those are great projects, and we encourage you to do them, but that is not what we're looking for this grant. A good project will have demonstrated community involvement or engagement in planning and implementation. So obviously, if you're thinking about, you have a downtown plan, a parks plan, a comprehensive plan, some of these spaces might be identified in those if you have a signature downtown or commercial space that you've always been looking at, but it might just be that you can document that you've had conversations in your community about either, hey, this space is an eyesore, this space is underutilized, the arts districts, the Rotary have had discussions about what could be done here. We want to maximize this space. It's causing issues, for whatever reason, or, we've been looking for a place to do X, Y, Z. This is a great opportunity. So it does not have to be a formal plan, but we do want there to be conversations in your community with partners on maximizing the space, on programming the space, and on obviously community engagement for planning. A good project will, as I mentioned, increase the number of users and activities in the space ideally year round. So I had lots of folks there's lots of communities in Wisconsin I've learned that really have sports fields in need of renovation, but a sports field by nature is rarely going to accommodate multiple uses. Even if you tell me that you're painting pickleball lines on your tennis court, that's still only really one audience. Most sports leagues that I know do not want, your softball league does not want concerts being thrown on their softball diamond. So ideally, we'll build a flexible space where multiple users can take advantage of the space, program things, host events, people can hang out. It has a lot of flexibility in terms of all users, all ages. A good project creates a visible transformation. So ideally, it's a space that's visible, a space and improvements that are visible from a nearby commercial district or major street, and benefits the district and community. So if it's walkable to nearby businesses, walkable to other destinations within your community, that is a plus. And an optimal project begins construction during 2023. So if you're thinking about what projects in your communities might be good, again, think about not just parks, but what spaces are vacant or underutilized currently that are walkable to your business community or to other major destinations. These can be alleys, these can be pocket parks, or again, places where buildings have burned down or been torn down that are currently serving no purpose. These can be parking lots that are not heavily utilized. They should have been identified. Again, it could be in plans, but it could be within conversations that you can document that you've had in the community. Again, walkable to and visible to pedestrians, and with the potential to accommodate a variety of uses and programming, ideally with the input and collaboration of community partners. So how are these going to be scored? Once we have collected the applications and made sure that everybody has put their best foot forward and answered all the questions, provided everything that's needed, the scoring criteria will include, again, creation of a visible and pedestrian-oriented space, the potential of the space to attract multiple user groups, and again, you will have to actually indicate who is using it and what your goals are, the impact of the project on the community, the district that it's in and on nearby businesses. And again, how are we going to measure the impact after the project happens? Are we going to survey the businesses? Are they going to be involved in programming? Things like that. Demonstrated community support for the project. So this can come in collaborative programming. This can come through the inclusion of multiple funding partners for local match. It can come through civic participation in the planning process. It can come through joint, somebody owns the land, somebody's going to program it, somebody's going to fund it. So any sort of partnerships are good to mention here. And the budget and the match funding preparedness will be another scoring criteria. So some of you may have detailed budgets and you're far along in your planning. You might have site plans and contractor estimates and everything. Some of you might have a sketch in, Google Earth or Google Maps of what you're going to do and pages from, street furniture catalogs with pricing for things you're going to put in. Both are equally okay. We don't expect that everyone has hired a landscape architect if your space is fairly straightforward. Some of these projects will hopefully be small in rural communities. $50,000 for a total project does not require all of that. So, but we will look for higher scores for those who have secured their funding, even if some of that has not been pledged. If you're going to crowdfund for $5,000 and here's how we're going to do it, and we've got commitment from the Rotary for $5,000 and things like that. So having that identified. The timeline I kind of already mentioned. We will have the formal application out by November 15th, if not before. We will try to send an email to everyone who's registered for this call, announcing that when it is available. So if you do want to request an application, you'll be able to do so. Then applications will be due January 31st. They will all be through our new Network Wisconsin platform, which some of you have utilized already, but it's an online application system. Again, we'll have the opportunity to go back out and ask for clarification if we need it, so everyone has all of the information needed to evaluate their project thoroughly in the system, and then award announcements are scheduled for May 1st. So again, it will be a competitive review committee that will look at them once they're all submitted. So what are the requirements to apply? You will work with your regional economic development directors to submit the grants. I have a map and you can find it at this website if you don't know who your regional director is at this point. We will, again, submit applications through a new Network Wisconsin platform, so it is all online. You will answer questions and upload documents. Some of the required information will include photos of your current space, so maybe maps of your current space, where is it in relation to other things, identifying the limitations, why people are not using it now, what groups are using it, what are your goals for the space, who are your partners, both for building it out and programming it, what is your budget, what are your revenue sources and uses of funds, what are you planning in terms of site plans, schematics, elements that you're going to incorporate, who are the partnerships and stakeholders that are at the table making this happen, and then some narrative pieces. What are the goals? How will it positively impact? Oh, thank you, Nathaniel. The map is linked in the chat, so if you want to check out who your regional director is, you can click on that right there. And then a project narrative for how this project is going to impact the districts and the community, and ideally how you're going to track that and keep on top of it, so when you report, you can. So probably another really key question is, what are the eligible and ineligible expenses from a grant perspective? So we'll start with the things that are not eligible. Past costs, obviously, if you've already spent the money, you're not going to be able to use it for a grant. This is a reimbursable grant, which we'll cover, but so only things that move forward from the application will be eligible. The purchase of the site is not eligible. In-kind contributions, so if the city is going to do the electrical work, that is not an eligible expense. If a business in town is going to donate the picnic tables, that is not an eligible expense. Soft costs, architects, engineers are not eligible. Building improvements, except for restrooms. So if you're hoping to make an indoor-outdoor space, or you do demolition of a building, or you gut a building for use of the space, for an event center, for instance, that would not be eligible. District or community-wide improvements, again, we talked about the fact that wayfinding is an eligible use, or kiosks, but only as it relates to that space, not from the whole district. Again, no event, staffing, programming, or maintenance costs ongoing are going to be eligible. Funding for private spaces that are not accessible to the public would not be allowed. So if you're a private business with a courtyard that there's no public access to, that would not, unless you're a paying customer, would not be eligible. And then obviously activities that are eligible for other WEDC grants could not apply for this one instead. So things that we are using as grant and match sources are public space improvements. So the site preparation, if you need to do grading or stormwater, the enhancements to the space, whether that's public art, landscaping, benches, bike racks, amenities for the space, infrastructure, if you need to add electrical, lighting, water features, whether that be splash pads, fountains, drinking fountains, restrooms, would be eligible. Seasonal equipment that you plan to reuse. So this is a departure from other WDC grants that require fixed objects, but if you have movable tables, chairs, umbrellas, heaters, fire pits, things that are going to be used in the space regularly, those are allowable under this grant as eligible match. And then for those of you who are fortunate to receive grant funding, the project will need to start in 2023. We will require a display of WDC logo on signage for the project. As I mentioned, it is a reimbursable grant, so you will have to expend the funds and then submit that information to us to be reimbursed. We'll allow 2 draw requests. So if you have a $50,000 project, you can submit twice for reimbursement or $25,000. Either way, but 2 draw requests. Your final performance report on the space, including photos, what happened, measurements, impact, will be due on December of 2024. So for up to a year potentially from when the space is completed. And again, we'll look for photos of the project and a narrative of the outcomes. How did the use of the space change? How much programming was now held? What was the impact on nearby businesses? And essentially, how did the program perform based on what your goals were? So if you do have questions, we are recording this webinar. We will send out the slides and the recording link from this webinar to everybody who is registered. We are also working on an FAQ document, so that will also be available. So any questions that you all ask here will go into that document along with the rest that we've collected to date. And that will be posted, and we will share that with, again, everyone who is registered here. The grant program does have a landing page at wdc.org/vibrant-spaces, so you can check for links to the program guidelines, the program brochure, a one-page flyer, and then eventually all of this additional information will be linked there as well. And then again, once the applications are available, which should be no later than November 15th, but hopefully sooner, we hopefully will send an email to everyone on this call notifying you, but you will need to work with, again, your regional economic development director to actually submit that application. So if you don't know what region you are in, I have a map up here on the slide that shows the map of regions and the link to actually to click on it to actually hover over these and find the contact information you would need to contact those folks is available at that website. So that is the overview of the grants. I know most of you have already had time to read the brochure as well. So what questions do we have?
Yeah, you want to take a break and I can read you the question? You can grab a drink
Sure.
of water.
That sounds lovely.
So we should circle back to the first question that Erin asked. How do you define a community for a city like Milwaukee? How many awards will be given in Milwaukee? So the answer to that one was based on municipal boundaries. That's what defines a community. So in the instance of Milwaukee, that's one award that they can apply for and receive. Okay, next question. Would a PA system be eligible?
If it's related to a space, I mean, so if you're building a stage with a PA system and electrical and other things, yeah. I mean, there's no reason that it wouldn't be. We didn't specify, but the question of the municipal support. So the municipality does have to be the applicant, but they also have to submit a resolution supporting the project. So every municipality can only support one project, and unfortunately, for all those of you who are on the call whose cities have many vibrant spaces that would like improvement, you're going to have to pick one this year. Hopefully the one that's the best contender to meet the guidelines. But I'm sure there will be many communities that'll have to make tough choices.
Yeah, and we had a question and I saw it disappear, but I think for the greater good, Can donated goods and services be used as match for the grant?
No, unfortunately, in-kind stuff can't, which I know in many of our communities, that is an incredible strength in rural communities, is the ability to solicit in-kind support. And by all means, you are still welcome to solicit as much in-kind support as you can to make your dollars go further, but they will not be eligible for match for the grant.
Jeff asked the question, are there any requirements or advantages for low income areas?
Not specifically as a scoring criteria. But this is a low dollar amount program, so hopefully, you know, like I said, a $50,000 park is something that even the smallest community can pull off.
Great. Next question. Can your project already be put out to bid, but just not started yet?
I suppose, yeah, I mean, so as long as the funds aren't expended until after the grant application is accepted, then, yeah, you should have all the great information for your budget to submit.
Is this strictly for downtown spaces, or could it be used in a neighborhood park?
So it is not strictly for downtowns in the sense that not everyone has a downtown if you're a rural community, and that if you're a neighborhood in Milwaukee, you have a commercial district that is, you know, equally as big as many downtowns. But so depending on your definition of neighborhood park, if it's a park that is not walkable and accessible to nearby businesses, it's probably not going to score very well. So if it's primarily serving the residents of a neighborhood, as opposed to a neighborhood commercial district or a rural community that has, you know, a neighborhood and its businesses in proximity, it would not score as well. Other questions?
I don't see any other questions. Oh. They're coming in. All you needed to do was ask, Erin. All right.
So if you have some of your work starting, and you still have the rest, I mean, so if you're preparing the site now and you're starting your project in 2023, you can submit for the project that you're going to do. You can't get reimbursed or submit your site work that you've already expensed. But if you have future costs that are going to be sufficient for the match, you could still submit the rest of the project.
If a project has more than one of the eligibility requirements, will it score higher?
Yeah, so if we go back to that slide of the scoring. So each of these criteria is going to be worth 10 points. So on a scale, obviously. So if you are it's the really visible, really pedestrian oriented, it's going to attract all, you know, youth and old people alike. It's going to, you know, partner with nearby businesses and 5 other community organizations. And your budget is all complete and you have all your sources and uses of funding, then you're going to score really highly. If you are missing some of these categories entirely, again, it's a competitive grant, so you may not score very highly at all. So yes, you will definitely score higher.
All right, Derek had a question and we've got an answer for you, Derek. Who do we contact and how do we know who to contact at the municipality so they can consider your project? And I think a great entry point and what we do great at WEDC, our regional directors, is connect you with your points of contact at your local municipality. So again, refer to that map, reach out to your regional director, and we can give you a contact name at the municipality in which you reside or your project would be in. Lewis had a question. Are streetscaping elements eligible for this grant, or is it primarily focused on one parcel of land and not a street?
Right. So it's primarily focused on one space. So there are lots of elements that are included, like bike racks or streetscapes or wayfinding, that I know communities would love to do their entire, you know, street tree system. But the goal is not to improve your whole main street. It's just improve one space to be a dynamic place within that district. So no, not district-wide elements.
Next question is a good clarifier. So it's about a rundown building. If we have a lot with a rundown building, can this grant money be used towards redoing the inside of the building and the outside?
Unless the building is just going to be restrooms for the space, the answer is no. So if you're looking to renovate the whole building as part of the space, maybe it's going to be a visitor center within the space or a coffee shop within the space. That's fabulous, but the funds can't be used for the building. The restrooms are the only eligible use.
And then a question from Kate. Is the design expected to be final by the time that we apply for the grant? Or can some form of engagement regarding design happen after funds are awarded?
I mean, you'll have to have a pretty good idea of what you're doing to have a budget. Is there some additional opportunity to have community input in terms of programming or in terms of, some of the layout perhaps? But you're going to have enough done to be able to tell us what you're doing and have a budget. But public engagement is obviously encouraged.
All right. Any other questions? There we go.
Yes, it can be used for private events. Oh, sorry, I should repeat for those who are on the phone. It's like public speaking. So it's a public project. Can it be fenced and have operating hours? And can the space be used for private events? So yes, the space can definitely be used for private events if you have, folks that want to rent it for things or fitness classes that want to be hosted in the space. We want it to be programmed and used for all audiences, all ages. And certainly if it's obviously public restrooms often have operating hours. So if your public spaces have limited hours, as long as it's, not 2 hours a week or something, as long as it's for public use, yes, that would not be excluded.
Would relocation of a memorial be an allowed expense as part of an overall project?
I mean, I assume you're relocating it out of the middle of a park or something like that to be able to program it. Potentially that could be a site improvements expense. It might be advisable if you have enough other eligible expenses to not try to include that in it. You might have to do some grading after the moving, and that would certainly be eligible.
Yeah, maybe along the lines of that, on the topic of in-kind donations and or things that you're doing above and beyond the project budget that you would apply for, such as what Erin just explained. Please go into that level of detail in your narrative, as so you can tell the whole story.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tina. For those things that aren't ineligible, it doesn't mean that they're not valuable or relevant. So if you want to talk to us about the in-kinds, in addition to the grant that we're submitting, our city is contributing $30,000 in electrical support, and our Parks and Rec department is buying XYZ games for the space. I mean, those are all relevant things to the narrative. They're just not things that we're going to consider in the budget. But they make a space great, and they are relevant.
There is another question from Kate. Could the grant be used for the renovation of a current downtown restroom along with enhancing the space around the restroom?
I suppose. I don't see why not.
And from Derek, is fencing costs covered in the grant? The idea of creating a public oasis space.
I mean, I suppose that could be a site amenity. I mean, if you're putting a splash pad and you need to fence it off, or if you have a beer garden that your municipality requires fencing around, it's not specifically ineligible, no.
One from Meredith. To clarify on the streetscape question, if you're targeting the improvements to a single street or alley, is that eligible?
So if it's an alley space that you're trying to transform with multiple, so I think the way to think of it is, are we doing multiple things in a single space? So if we have an alley, are we hanging string lights, installing public art and benches, and making it a a pedestrian walkway, or are we making it a shared eating space with shade structures, or are we making it an outdoor living room where people can hang out? We're transforming that alley into an actual place, as opposed to a long alley that runs the entire length of a block, and maybe we're just adding better security lighting and a mural to the entire alley. So it's really going to look at, are we creating a place out of an area, or are we improving a whole corridor? And the corridor answer is no. If it's a defined space that people are going to experience and spend time in, then the answer is yes. So I know alleys come in all shapes and sizes. So if it's, you know, a long, long, long alley that you're just going to add security lighting on and, you know, a few other touches, that's not going to create a huge It's not to say that we're not going to accept your application, but it's not going to score very well in the creation of a visible transformation to a space. It's not going to be a significant transformation. I think we might have exhausted the train of questions.
I feel like your popcorn popping analogy. We've we've popped the last kernel.
All the kernels are popped. Well, hopefully that means that all the kernels are sparking good ideas locally. So again, we're really thrilled that so many of you were interested in this. It is a record-setting amount of interest for a new program, and that is fabulous to see. Hopefully this gave you some good ideas and a little more guidance. Yes, you can keep asking questions. We'll stay here. But if those of you who don't have any more questions don't want to hang out, you can. Can contiguous municipalities split coordinate? So, oh, sorry, I didn't read the whole thing again. Can contiguous municipalities submit coordinated applications related to projects such as a bicycle pedestrian trail that would connect multiple communities? If a community happened to be immediately adjacent to each other and they shared an actual space, I know South Beloit is not in Wisconsin, but if Beloit and South Beloit wanted to create a plaza outside the Snapper Stadium that crosses their city lines, that might be acceptable, but a trail is going to be a long corridor again and not a defined space that people are experiencing. So I'm not saying you couldn't coordinate. Collaboration is fabulous, but I can't imagine that a trail would ever be small enough to have that level of impact. Will the slides be available after the webinar? Yes, we have recorded this. We will make the slides and the recording and the resulting FAQ document available to everybody. And again, if you're here now, you will receive all of the information, all of the follow-up. You have identified yourself as an interested party, so you will receive all of that information. And if you think of questions, obviously you have the map for your regional director, so you now know where to go to get those questions answered. And you have time. Applications will be out in the next month or so, but applications aren't due till the end of January. So plenty of time to get the public engagement, plenty of time to develop a budget, plenty of time to do all of that stuff. You don't have to rush through it, but hopefully you can still get it in your municipal budget. Why is there a requirement of 1 grant per municipality? That is how our community development investment grant program has always been funded, and this is a pilot within that program. So that is why. Also because we can only fund 30 of them, and so it's not fair if one community gets 2 of them, especially this first year. We want everybody to have a chance at creating a vibrant space. And because we don't want any city to have to deal with creating 2 spaces simultaneously in 1 year, because that's a lot of work also. So for all of the above, only 1 per community this year. Make it your biggest and best.
Erin, do you see the hand raised? Mary B.
Oh.
Did you have a question that you wanted to ask? You'd have to unmute yourself. Otherwise, maybe it's a high five.
Oh, there she is.
I think you might have answered it, but is this a repeat grant, do you think? Will they be available for next year?
Well, we never know the answer to that, but if we get 150 grant applications, certainly it will be a strong case to make that there's interest.
Okay, all right. Because we have a project that starts in 2024, And this could be, the DOT is revamping the town. This could be something that we want to put new streetlights on in this park area. But we can't start until 2024, March.
Totally understand. I know that I've had many conversations with people who are like, oh, we have it, but we can't do it next year. We sincerely hope it will be available in future years, but I can't ever promise promise what the future will bring. But we look forward to lots of great applications so that we can. Derek, this grant is for privately owned properties that are used for public benefit. Yes, so we know that there are many communities that have privately owned properties, whether that be an alley, whether that be a parking lot, whether that be a spot where a building burned down. It may be privately owned, but if it's going to be a space that's publicly used, so in Monroe, they have a pocket park that's a community garden. In Prairie du Chien, they have a parking lot that's used for all their community festivals, farmers markets, concerts downtown. Yes, that would be eligible. We would look for you to get some sort of grant, some sort of lease agreement with that property owner, even if you're leasing the space for $1, just so that there's a legal agreement and confirmation that the space is available for the public use. But yes, the public does not have to own the space. They do have to be the applicants, but the funds can be spent by anyone. So if I'm the Village of Marathon City, I know Andy was on this call. If I'm the Village of Marathon City and I have my chamber has a space that they would like to develop for programming, the village can apply on behalf of the space. They can pass the funds through to the chamber, and maybe that lot is owned by a business owner in town and going to be leased to whatever the art park, beer garden, farmers market space is. Yes, again, community partnerships are encouraged. So it does have to be, the municipality is going to have to apply and support the project, and it will have to have some sort of lease or development agreement or something that says, yes, it's going to be for public use for, a year or 2 or 3 or however, whatever reasonable term you come up with, to demonstrate that that's, that we're not just going to fund the creation of an amazing public beer garden that's going to become a private beer garden the next day for the nearby business. So as long as you can demonstrate that, you don't have to purchase the property. Can another grant be used as the match? Yes. It doesn't matter where the matching funds come from, as long as you have figured that out. They can be crowdfunded, they can be grants, they can be municipal dollars, they can be private, any combination. Any further questions, Spurred, now that we answered a few more?